Stephen, let me see if we can bring this back to the side. The sole responsibility in this case, when it's an oil spill that's going to impact our fishing industry, our beaches, our shores, would be the federal government. The fact is they sat back for 9 days and they did absolutely nothing. The very same people
what are they supposed to do?
Hang on, Kirsten. The very same people, Stephen, that were so fast to criticize George W. Bush in the other two instances.
Right. Well, I'm half with you, Sean. I think certainly if there's the case that there's a double standard. I mean, I don't. For Kirsten to suggest that there's not a double standard, even if the situations aren't directly analogous, is just flat crazy. There's clearly a double standard, and if this had been George W. Bush as president, we would be now enduring front-page pieces in the New York Times about George Bush and oil and Dick Cheney and Halliburton. I mean, there's clearly a difference in the tone of coverage. But I have to say, Sean, I do agree with Kirsten that there's not much the president could do. I don't think in this instance, when you had assessments from the Coast Guard and from BP that the initial spill may well burn off, that it was 1,000 barrels a day, and that it's been kicked up to 5,000 barrels a day, and I think that's what triggered the action. I just don't think that if Janet Napolitano had been in Louisiana 5 days ago, that doesn't make me feel better.
Stephen, we had images right here on the Fox News channel. We saw the oil slick. We saw which direction it was coming. And there's a lot we could have done to contain this. So certainly we should have sent people out there to at least assess the damage, assess the environmental impact, and look, if they had acted earlier, 8, 9 days ago, there's a lot they could have done to contain it. They can literally, they cordon off the areas where the oil slick is, and they have the ability to almost like vacuum out the oil as it is in the water. And if they would have started 9 days ago, Stephen, they would have had a much.
Well, I think no, that's right, and they could have done more, and I think it would have had a minimal impact. But if you listen to the commandant of the Coast Guard, I mean, the main problem that they're facing right now is a problem with Mother Nature, not with anything that we could have done. The wind shifted, it blew, it's now blowing all of this towards Louisiana, and the fact that they had miscalculated initially the number of barrels per day, I think is one of the reasons that we're seeing the problems that we're now seeing.
Yeah, well, and the other thing that's happening, Kirsten, is this is now being politicized. We have Nancy Pelosi, we have 4 New Jersey Democrats, we've got Ben Nelson, and now the criticism, oh, we can't have offshore drilling. So, but you see, this is where I think fundamentally our energy policy and the Democratic Party being beholden to environmental extremists, if we had nuclear power, which environmentalists are against, if we drilled in Anwar, which environmentalists are against, if we expanded coal mining, which environmentalists are against, we haven't built a refinery in 35 years, environmentalists are against it, we wouldn't be so dependent on foreign oil. And we may make the case that we wouldn't have to drill in an environmentally sensitive area like the Gulf.
Right. Environmentalists caused the oil spill. I mean, I know that's what Republicans are saying.
All right, I've got to ask you, we just had this in the last segment here about this horrible oil spill. A number of people lost their lives in the explosion. But more importantly, this happened last Tuesday. And it's only in the last 2 days that the administration has gotten involved. Now, why do I believe that if George W. Bush were president, that this would be the biggest deal, slow to respond, slow to react, and almost everybody's defending the president here for doing nothing.
Well, because
was it his responsibility?
Well, if Katrina was George Bush's responsibility, this is Barack Obama's responsibility. You can't have 2 sets of rules. One applied to a Democratic president, one applied to a Republican president, and I think we're clearly saying that we do. Can Barack Obama personally go out there with a bucket and start picking up the oil? No. Yeah. But the point is, you've made it, I think, very well. There has been a significant sort of gap between the time of the accident and the time in which now we're beginning to see a federal response.
Barack Obama's Katrina. Do you think this becomes politically his Katrina, or
only
potentially?
If the news media creates it to be.
It's not.
It goes back to even my experience. The media can frame the issues, and they can frame the context in which they're presented. So if they don't say, where was President Obama? No, it won't be his.
I was surprised at Stephen Hayes' reaction. 9 days later, the administration all of a sudden realizes there's a big oil spill in the Gulf. And now it's about to hit the shores of this country. They declared
it's already hit.
Yeah, it's already hit, and in a massive way. And I'm thinking, if George W. Bush didn't react for 9 days, it would be lead story on every newscast, every place, everywhere. Am I right, John Fund?
Yes, but the most important thing is, regardless of what the blame game is, let's make sure we clean this up. Now, the Obama administration deserves fault for some things, and they had bad luck in others. You know, we didn't know the weather would change, but we did know that the way you deal with an oil slick is well known in science. You set it on fire. So the light oil is burned off, and the heavy oil drops to the ocean bottom. Yeah. That was not done. The 1990 Oil Pollution Act requires that the federal government has to pre-position all equipment that will clean up an oil spill. They did not have enough equipment, and they did not get there fast enough. So some things they can't be blamed on, but they can be blamed for not using the real science, which is turning this into a fireball.
They can be blamed for not reacting right away and knowing the severity of what this could turn into here, Judith.
Wait a minute. Let's blame BP. They're the ones who were in charge of this. They're the ones who said it was only 1,000 barrels an hour.
1,000 barrels a day is a lot of oil.
5,000
and more by some
5 times
estimates.
that, and yet BP is they're working very hard to clean it up. Well, they should be.
They're going to suffer lawsuits that will probably put them into court for decades.
Eric Holder already has a team of attorneys. They did do that, the administration. They did send a team of attorneys. They didn't send people to clean it up and contain it.
The first responders
was Eric Holder, the attorney.
Are you guys weeping for Exxon Valdez? Come on, give us a break. They were sloppy. This happened.
Of course the company is at fault, although we don't know all the facts. Exxon Valdez was a finite amount of oil. We knew how much was in it. This was an uncapped well. We didn't know how much was going to come out because it's continuing to leak.
And we still don't know.
And we did not do the due diligence to prepare for the worst possible outcome. We should have set this thing on fire. We didn't. That is going to be catastrophic.
Well, and it's terrible, too, that, you know, taxpayer dollars are probably going to have to be used to help clean up this massive spill. I mean, all these Gulf states. BP should be focusing on trying to cap that well, because they say it may not be capped for a month, 2 months possibly. It could be worse than the Exxon Valdez spill, which it's going to be catastrophic for their fishing, the shrimp, you know, harvesters down there. I mean, it's going to be terrible. But I think BP really needs to focus on capping that, and maybe we should start focusing on the coastal areas.
You know what I don't understand about your position, Judith? George W. Bush spent 4 extra minutes with school children on 9/11 and was excoriated by the left, by almost every Democratic politician in Washington. 4 extra minutes because he was trying to figure out how to get out of that classroom gracefully on 9/11. Beaten up, to this day he's still beaten up. 2 days they're late for Hurricane Katrina. You have an incompetent governor, incompetent mayor. And here this happens 9 days, and the same people that were critical, now they're trying to use this for politics. Nancy Pelosi, Ben Nelson, you got 4 politicians in New Jersey. They're all saying, this is the case. We now can't, we've got to end all offshore oil drilling.
Well, I'm going to agree with Stephen Hayes, who said if Mother Nature is at fault, but Sean, I have to agree with you. If this were George Bush's administration, this entire spill would be George Bush's fault. There is a double standard. There's no doubt about it. However, I really think we have to keep our eye on BP and perhaps Halliburton, by the way.
Keep your eye on BP. We need to clean, as John was saying, we better do everything we can do. And you were saying, right now, all hands on...
What do you want him to do?
When you have a catastrophe like this, instead of Eric Holder sending lawyers, perhaps they should have been doing what John was suggesting. There are other means of containing oil where they literally surround it, contain it.
Well, send the Navy in. Do it. Don't wait for BP to do it. Do it.
But I think that BP clearly has a role here, too.
Yes, we can send them the bill, but let's have the Navy do it.
Right, but we had a 9-day period where we saw the images. We were showing them here on the Fox News channel for days.
Well, at least this president didn't fly over the oil spill and say, well, pretty big spill.
Move on.
That is such a cheap shot. Yeah, he hasn't gone at all.
He hasn't gone at all. He doesn't plan to. He announced today he doesn't even plan to go down there.
That's a cheap shot, though.
That is a cheap shot. Of course
because George Bush said he didn't want to land because he didn't want to disrupt what was happening on the ground.
I've been to places where the president has landed. I've been at the Daytona 500. They have to shut down everything. Airports around for miles. They have to shut down everything on the ground. I mean, it's a big process. I can understand why he didn't do that.
Yeah, 2 days late. I got to tell you, journalism in America is dead, and it died in the election of Barack Obama. We have a lot more.